want me to volunteer my time so you can make money?
It is hard to find a former pro football player whose body hasn't paid a very high price.
A cold-blooded killer, and that's a fact. You signed the papers to bust a cap. Now you got blood on your hands. Will you ever understand?
And, oh, by the way, the NCAA and the administrators and coaches at these universities happen to be predominantly white. And whether inherently or explicitly, the amateurism rules negatively impact people of color.
Well, unfortunately, nothing's more American than cheating workers out of an honest day pay, too.
But I think what it came down to were the sponsors threatened to pull back from the team, and that's when the team was forced to do it. So when money is threatened, when their pocketbook is threatened, you know, they're going to definitely make moves.
You're worse than Michael Vick. You really make me sick.
We are not going to stand for this anymore.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's me here with another activism, anti-capitalism deep dive video. Today I'm doing the pure evil, the football/NFL files, a deep dive in this topic. So let's get started into this video. So yeah. The annual Super Bowl is not only the most popular sporting event, but the most profitable. NFL.com reported that over 200 million viewers, 2/3 of the U.S. households watch the Super Bowl and the Super Bowl games. Billions of people around the world watch the event, broadcasted in over 130 countries and in 30 languages. Players on the winning team will receive $157,000 and players on the losing side will receive $82,000. The NFL organization will add close to $2 billion in its coffers in merchandise sales and tens of millions of dollars in ticket sales, with the cheapest ticket price being and amounting to over $3,200 a ticket. The consequences of football's brutality are mostly hidden away. Most people do not want to peek behind the curtain. It is a sport in which movement in all extremities is treated as good news and not some grim line delivered with more unsaid than said. Half of football is enduring pain, the other half is inflicting it. Risks to players' health include concussions, traumatic brain injuries, arthritis, and potentially deadly cardiac arrests and events. I know many people make the argument that these players know what they're getting themselves into, but I find that really hard and absurd to believe on a few different levels. We're constantly learning more about just how prevalent concussions and traumatic brain injuries are in the NFL and how far-reaching effects of such injuries can be. So is it really fair to say these players understood the magnitude of their choices to start playing football as children and adolescents, and the racial dynamics of the NFL player, where you are literally put your body on the line for your job, cannot be ignored? The 32 NFL team owners, none of whom who are black and the only 2 of whom who are not white, profit massively off the labor of players. Nearly 70% of whom are black, and in a country where the upward mobility for black children is much less likely than it is for white children, why must such a famously lucrative career for black men require they put their bodies and brains on the line? The NFL is a billion-dollar plantation. Former Miami Dolphins coach Brian Flores filed a class action lawsuit against the National Football League, and that contained at least 2 explosive claims. The NFL owners engaged in a sham interviews of minority candidates, a claim bolstered by text messages from none other than Bill Belichick, and the Dolphins owner Stephen Ross had offered Flores cash to lose the games on purpose so the team could snag a top draft choice. But the most remarkable aspect of the suit is that it says the quiet part out loud when it comes to the league's inherent racial exploitation. The NFL is racially segregated and is managed much like a plantation. Its 32 owners, none of whom are black, profit substantially from the labors of NFL players, 70% of whom are black. The owners watch the games atop NFL stadiums in a luxury bougie capitalism boxes, while the majority black workforce put their bodies on the line every single Sunday, taking vicious hits and suffering debilitating injuries to their bodies and their brains, while the NFL and their owners, such as the owner that owns Walmart, reap billions of dollars. The NCAA sport was built upon foundational racial inequalities of American society and higher education. White colonizers Native Americans established the first universities and colleges on the U.S. soil on stolen land from indigenous peoples and built and paid for these institutions using the exploited labor and profits extracted from black enslaved people. The NCAA, though, insists that all of its players are student athletes motivated by the love of the game, so on they'll be working for free. Most fans of college football go along with the pretense, looking past the fact that the NCAA makes nearly $1 billion a year from unpaid labor. So by refusing to pay athletes, the NCAA isn't just perpetuating a financial injustice, it's also committing a racial one. College football playoff will generate more than $7 billion from ESPN over a 12-year contract. Merchandising deals and licensing deals revenue reportedly exceeds $4 billion a year. There's so much money up for grabs that the individual schools and conferences have created their own sport TV channels. This enormous cash flow is carefully kept away from football players, but coaches, administrators, and other staff members get to bathe in it. According to US Today, 9 athletic directors make more than $1 million each, and nearly 50 make more than $500,000. Football coaches, too numerous to count, make well into the 7 figures, including many still getting paid millions after they've already been fired. Louisiana State University football team just hired a defensive coordinator for $1.3 million per year, and for the most part, the people getting paid are white. A 2015 study by the University of Central Florida's Institution for Diversity and Ethics in Sport found that 86.7% of all athletic directors in the NCAA were white. At many colleges and schools, football players are forced into majors in which they have no interest in. Take a look at the football rosters of most powerful 5 schools, and you'll find 2 or 3 majors that seem unusually popular among athletes. Often interdisciplinary programs that make it easier for academic advisors to pick classes for athletes to fit into the team's schedule. Players are often dissuaded from actually taking classes they prefer or have interest in. I don't think football can be made safely enough to justify its continued existence. I really feel people only watch it because of the violence and the tackling that is involved in the sport. When the Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field, a routine football hit had left a 24-year-old man laying motionless on the field in the grass, and EMT's hands clasped over his sternum trying to save his life. Nearly 9 minutes of CPR happened on the field as his teammates circled around him and watched. They believed that they were watching their teammate die on the field, something most football players never consider a possibility. An injury, sure, we've all seen plenty of them, but not a fatality. It was so shocking. So frankly was the fact that the NFL adjourned the game. The game always goes on. When a player breaks an ankle in practice, they move the drill, leaving the injured player while the business of football continues elsewhere. Howard Glenn broke his neck in a AFL game and died later that day. Chuck Hughes died after collapsing during the 1971 Lions-Bears game. In both cases, the game kept moving and going. Hamilton suffered cardiac arrest during the play. His heartbeat was restored on the field, and he was in serious medical condition. League of Denial, the NFL's concussion crisis, was produced by Frontline and broadcast on PBS about how thousands of former players have claimed the league tried to cover up how football inflicted long-term brain injuries on many players. The film also looks closely at the efforts of researchers led by Anne McKee at Boston University Center for Study of Traumatic Encephalopathy, where brains of a number of former NFL athletes have been examined. The NFL tried to imitate scientists studying the link between pro football and traumatic brain injuries. The National Football League went after the reputation of the first doctor to link the sport to the degenerative brain disease. He named chronic traumatic encephalopathy 4 weeks into the 2002 pro football season, the soon-to-be the biggest problem for the National Football League was standing in Pittsburgh autopsy room, looking down at the body of the most fearsome men to have ever played the offensive line. As a future problem, Dr. Bennett Almu, a Nigerian-born forensic pathologist, was tasked with that day's routine autopsies, stared at the battered body of Iron Mike Webster. He made what would turn out to be a fateful decision. He asked his assistant to preserve the brain for future study. What the pathologist had found in Webster's brain, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a progressive degenerative disease mainly associated with boxers and victims of brain trauma, broke the NFL's concussion problem wide open. But instead of working with scientists and doctors to better understand the damaging effects of repeated concussions and how the league could improve the game to reduce head injuries, the NFL actually went after the reputation of all the scientists and basically bullied them. This is what the capitalist pigs do. They only care about capitalism profits, not the lives of the players or the people. The scientists chosen by paper was particularly troubling for the NFL league, as it concluded that Webster's brain had a neuropathological changes consistent with long-term repeative concussion brain injuries. The paper was published in Neurosurgery. Soon after the paper's publication, he received a notice that the MTBI was calling for its retraction. In the letter, the scientists, who did not identify their NFL connection or ties, and none of whom were neuropathologists, called his research paper completely wrong and false, and even claimed that for Webster there is no known history of brain trauma inside professional football. They're pulling a big tobacco tactic. The NFL's efforts to undermine him continued in 2007 after Roger Goodell took over as NFL commissioner. That year, the league held a commission summit inviting the most predominant scientists who've been fighting the NFL on concussions to present their work, but he was not invited, and his colleague Julian Bayliss presented his research paper instead. Bayliss later confirmed that the NFL was orchestrating Bennett, saying that they were trying to blackball him, lock him out, marginalize him. He was the whistleblower. Another expert, Dr. Ann McKee, was later brought in to look at the brains of former NFL players. She too faced challenges from the doctors hired by the NFL, despite the NFL's frugal attempts to fight off the concussion science, both by harassing and bullying the scientists and whistleblowers, and through Madrid and others' efforts, momentum built against the league, forcing it to take action. The story goes that the NFL concussion settlement is a historic victory for the players, but the facts show that the NFL is pulling off a historic con. Ken McLean figured the National Football League was preparing to screw over his clients. The question was, how badly? A Kansas City attorney, McLean represents 24 former professional football players in their mid-30s to mid-60s, whom he says suffer from depression, impulsivity, and other life-altering symptoms of brain damage, presumably accumulated during the years of on-the-job helmet knocking. In theory, all of them ought to be covered by the proposed NFL concussion lawsuit settlements, a multi-million-dollar class action agreement that promises to compensate ailing retirees. It's a bogus deal, a fraudulent deal, on its face completely illusory, designed to pay very few people except for the lawyers and the players in the most extreme illness category cases. All of these men, saddled with neurological problems throughout their lifetimes, are not the NFL's concern. The settlement isn't designed to help hurting former players. To the contrary, it's designed to save the NFL as much capitalism profits as possible, to the tune of billions of dollars of potential brain damage liability. If the deal goes through, many sick retirees won't get paid. Most of those who do will receive a small sum. The people who are supposed to be negotiating the best possible deal for the former players predicts only 3,600 of them will actually receive cash awards. As for the awards themselves, estimates of that average former player will be 77 years old at the time of the settlement's diagnosis test qualify them for the payment. The deal reduces payouts on a progressive age-based scale. The older retirees are when they are deemed worthy of awards. The smaller those awards will be. For a 77-year-old former NFL player with ALS, that means 80% reduction from the maximum payout from $5 million to $1 million. For the same player with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or debilitating dementia, that means a reduction of 96 to 97% from as much as $3.5 million to as little as $40,000. Mood and behavior disorders are a sign of brain damage. They absolutely interfere with your daily life, with having a family, or holding down a job. Only the settlement doesn't compensate players suffering from those symptoms. It doesn't even screen for them, something McLean's clients learned the hard way. The league does not is not settling out of fear or the goodness of its corporate capitalism heart, or because it truly cares about its brain-damaged former employees. The league is settling out of fear of liability, fear of accountability. Kansas City team, whose ownership to this day refuses to change its racist logo and mascot, the nauseating display of majority white Kansas City fans defaming native heritage will no doubt create an ugly stain on the game. Years of protests organized by Indigenous-led coalitions forced the Washington team, the Redskins, now named Commanders, to change their image and mascot, which had offended Indigenous peoples for decades. Since Redskins is a racial slur, a derogatory term coined by colonialists often historically used interchangeably with savages, the appearance of Kansas City NFL team at the Super Bowl exposes U.S. anti-Indigenous racism for all the world to see. Kansas City fans can be counted to show up wearing red face and feathers and ready to do their tomahawk chop at every opportunity. NFL teams now have "End Racism" stamped at their end zones, but apparently that sentiment does not apply to Indigenous peoples. This is just woke capitalism. For decades, cheerleaders have been synonymous with the NFL, providing a touch of glamour, dance teams across the U.S. entertain thousands of fans every week, representing their franchise and their local community. But behind the scenes of some of the smiles and perfectly choreographed routines lies a dark world of painstaking work and alleged unequal pay and sexism. A new documentary, A Woman's Work, The NFL Cheerleader Problem, exposes the underbelly of a seemingly glamorous pursuit that follows the lives of two women who say they decided enough was enough. Former cheerleader Lacey Fields was the first to speak out in the documentary, filing a class action lawsuit on the behalf of the Riderettes against the Oakland Raiders in 2014, alleging wage theft and illegal employment practices. It led to several other cheerleaders following suit, including Maria Pinzone, a lead plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Buffalo Bills and the NFL in 2014. The Raiders settled for $1.2 million in September 2014, paying cheerleaders from 2010 to 2014 what they were owed in back in wages. Individual payments ranged from $2,000 to $30,000 depending on the number of seasons the woman danced on the team. She told CNN Sports she wasn't paid minimum wage for the countless hours she was putting in. There would be multiple community appearances and practice sessions, she said, that were unpaid. Equipment, uniforms, and treatment required to live up to the expected image of a cheerleader all came out of her own pocket, she told CNN Sport. Raiderettes made just $1,200 per season and would come out of the very end of the year. Maria Pinzone said she was expected to spend $650 on her team outfit and a further $500 on treatments to be ready for the team calendar shoot. She would then participate in hours unpaid appearances, she said, in some which were mandatory and sponsored events representing both the NFL and the Bills. As of September 2020, 10 out of the 26 NFL teams with cheerleading squads have been sued for wage theft, unsafe conditions, sexism, sexual harassment, and discrimination, according to the documentary. The NFL's problem with violence against women. Nearly 4 years after Ray Rice was caught assaulting his partner on video, the league only provides lip service to the violence against women. Perhaps the most striking case is that of Kansas City Chiefs Karen Hutt, who was caught on video published by TMZ shoving and kicking a 19-year-old woman. The Chiefs and the NFL had known about the incident since it occurred in February, but the player had not faced any discipline or consequences. The San Francisco 49ers, Reuben Foster was arrested twice this year for domestic violence against his ex-girlfriend, Alyssa Innes. Most recently, in late November, before the team let him go, within days, Washington picked Foster up with the team's senior vice president of player personnel, Doug Williams, claiming the incident was small potatoes and that he had investigated the matter himself. But for the victims, it shows how little football cares. They don't care about their players, they don't care about their fans, they don't care about the women, they don't care about any of that stuff. All they care about is their luxury, bougie capitalism lifestyle and making capitalism profits. I really do feel like the NFL has a crime problem. Just some notable examples include like O.J. Simpson, Michael Vick, Aaron Hernandez, Barrett Robertson, etc. When it comes to the environment, I briefly want to talk about this. Super Bowl parties produce tons of trash. A typical NFL game can produce 30 to 40 tons of solid waste on average, while a Super Bowl tournament produces closer to 55 or 60 tons of garbage and trash. So there's some reasons what we need to call out. So there has been NFL players engaging in trophy hunting, and I feel like we need to speak out against this atrocity. Trophy hunting fuels colonial race and slave injustice practice, perpetrates apartheid-era inequalities. Trophy hunting is reinforcing deep apartheid-era social and racial inequalities in Africa, and more reasons as to why trophy hunting is truly evil and vile. Ex-NFL star Derek Wolfe kills a massive mountain lion with a bow and arrow. There's no excuse or reason to kill animals or even trophy hunting. Like, it's a barbaric colonizer practice. Killing for animals for fun, is disgusting.